Do you want to know how to be OP with disc launchers? Well, I'm going to show you 8 tips you can dominate with disc launchers. And if you do enjoy the video, consider liking and subscribing. I'd appreciate it a ton. So the first thing is turning on vertical aiming. If you haven't already, turn on vertical aiming. It might be tough to use at first, but you'll get used to it and it'll definitely help you in the long run. Next, max out the epic disc launcher radius implant. Maxing this implant is super important if you want to utilize disc launchers. Next, try to get the high ground over your enemies. The reason why this is super important is because the easiest way to get back damage on your enemies is to splash the ground behind them, and if you have the height advantage, you can easily splash the ground behind them. But if you don't have the high ground, then you can't splash discs off the ground behind them. Instead, you either have to lock onto them and get front damage or splash the wall or roof behind them. And there's not always a wall or roof behind them. Next, prioritize back damage over everything. If you can splash your disc off a wall, a roof, or the ground behind them, do everything you can to splash your disc off of it. And if you can't do that, try to do everything you can to splash a wall or the ground besides them. And then locking onto them and getting front damage should be your last resort. You should only do it if you can't do anything else. The only time it's worth it to lock onto them and get front damage on them is if they have low health and you can finish them off, or if you're using Orion and you've marked them. Next, try to not lock onto your enemies. The reason why this is important is because it's tough to lock off enemies, so if you can avoid locking onto them in the first place, it will be much easier to get back damage on them. So try to avoid putting your cursor onto enemies so you can avoid locking onto them. But if you do end up locking onto them, move your cursor sideways super fast so you can lock off them, and then move it back in so you can get back damage on them. It also helps if you're farther than 60 meters since you can't lock onto enemies, but the problem with this is that the damage of the disc launchers will be less since you'll be out of their optimal range. Next, try to learn the splash spots on each map. Each map has spots where you can splash your discs off of, and it's super important to try to learn as many of them as possible. You can learn them by watching skilled players using disc launchers or even from playing yourself. Next, learn how to wall peek against snipers. When you're facing snipers, you need to wall peek or else you'll get easily sniped. You can do this by firing one disc launcher and peeking in and out. With all the EM rifles in the meta, it's super important to learn how to do this. And lastly, the best way to get better at using disc launchers is by playing 1v1s. Find an opponent that's similar SP and skill as you and challenge him to a 1v1. Don't play the 1v1 to see who's better. Play the 1v1 so both of you can improve. In 1v1s, disc launchers are by far the best weapon, so you can learn a ton by playing them. This is the way the top players have gotten so good at using disc launchers. They've played so many matches using disc launchers that they've mastered them. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and see you guys.